Hello students, in this session let us continue the discussion with respect to the rails. Okay, we'll be studying about the what are the functions of the rails, what are the requirements, types, and how do we select the length and weight of the rail section will be discussed in the present session. So first we as well let me just revise once what we discussed. So what is the rail? The rail is nothing but the running steel gird is made up of steel girders which is intended to carry the axle load, and that will be made up of the high cotton steel and it would be able to withstand the wear. And we also discussed upon the what are the functions of the rail. So it should provide a hard, smooth, unchanging surface for the passage of the moving loads, and it should have a maximum friction between the steel rails and the steel wheels, and it should be able to bear the stresses developed due to the heavy vertical load, and the stresses may also develop due to the lateral forces and also the braking forces and also due to the thermal stresses. And the rail should have a resistance to withstand the wear. It should undergo minimum wear, and possibility for the replacement and changes during the chances of during any failures, that should be easy for you. And also the rail should efficiently transfer the loads to the sleepers below it. Ultimately a ballast will take it, and to the ballast the loads will be transferred into the formation below. So now to serve all these functions whatever we discussed so far, so what are all the requirements of the rail section? So now we'll be discussing what are the ideal requirements of a rail section. So now here first with respect to the manufacturing process. So as we told you, to have a greater strength and the minimum wear, the rail section has to be made up with the proper composition of the steel. So we already discussed what should be the composition of steel, how much should be the carbon, manganese, phosphorus, aluminium, all those things, the composition need to be maintained, and it should be manufactured with the help of open fireplace or the duplex process, the rail section. And also the rail should have a sufficient vertical stiffness which would sufficient to which is enable to transmit the load to the several sleepers below it. And the vertical stiffness can be maintained achieved by providing the adequate height of the rail section. So as you can see here, this particular picture will show you one rail section. Okay, so here we have two rail section. The first rail here, the first section is what we can see here. This is the second rail. So these two rails or two different rail sections are connected with the help of the fish plates and the fish bolts. So now as you can see here, the rail section, so this portion we call it as the head, and the middle section we call it as the web section, and the below whatever you can see this we call it as the foot section. So now the requirements what we discussed, this is all regarding the how the cross section need to be provided. The next requirement is to rail should have a sufficient capability to withstand the lateral forces. So this ability to withstand the lateral forces can be achieved by providing the greater width at the head and the foot section. And also that will ensures the rail section to have a sufficient high lateral stiffness. And the next is the resistance to the wearing. So here the head portion has to be designed in such a way that the sufficient height will be provided in the head section, so that to account for the wear that can happens to occur in the all the rail section under the application of the heavy moving loads. And the next requirement is the rail section should have a sufficient flexural rigidity. So this flexural rigidity can be imparted to the rail section by providing a sufficient thickness to the web section, so to bear the load which is coming on the rail section. And the rail should have a sufficient stability against the overturning. So this will come to picture especially on the curve. So this resistance to overcome, you can make the rail section stable against the overturning by providing the sufficient width of the foot section. And the next one, the top and bottom of the head of the rail should be so shaped that it will enable the fish plate and fish bowl to transmit the vertical load efficiently from the head to the foot, especially at the joint portion. And also the center of they should have a relative smooth distribution of the material in the rail, in the head, web and the foot section must be balanced, so that will ensure the smooth transmission of the load from the head to the foot section. And next, with respect to the center of gravity, so if you have this rail section, the center of gravity should act exactly at the almost approximately at the mid height of the total rail section. So and also the total compressive maximum tensile strength that is developed must be equal to the maximum compressive stresses. And the whatever the tensile strength developed on a rail piece, that should not be more than, not less than the 72 kg per meter square. So these are the some of the ideal requirement that should be fulfilled by the rail section to perform the functions. So the next we'll move on to the what are all the different types of the rails. So the types of the rails can be classified so based upon the how the cross section is provided on the various section in the head, web and in the foot section. So you can see here on the top what you have seen, that is the head section. The head section is the one which is in contact with the steel wheels, and the web and the bottom portion where the portion which has been fitted to the sleepers, that we call it as the foot section. So now based upon the shape and what is the dimension that is provided on the various sections of the rails, we can classify the rails into three main different categories. The first one is the double headed rail, second is the bull headed rail, third one is the flat footed rails. So now we'll look into the how the different rail section is designed and what are all the advantages and disadvantages of providing the various rail sections. The first one what we can see is the double headed rails. So double headed rails are one in such that foot and the head, the foot portion as well as the head portion will have the same dimension. So such rail section we call it as the double headed, or you can also call it as the dumbbell rail section. So these were used in the initial days in the construction of the railway tracks. So here what is the idea behind that? So the double headed rails are constructed, manufactured keeping in the view that the rails that have been used when the head is worn out, when the wet head is worn out due to the rubbing action of the wheels, so the rails can be inverted. You can actually invert the rails and the foot section can be reused as the head. So what I'm saying to say, this is the head section and this is the foot section. If you can see the any worn out, if the head section is worn out, what you can do is can be reversed and the foot section can be used as the head and the head can be used as the foot section. So you can reverse it and reuse the rail section. But the thing is, by the experience it has been found that the foot also, once the head worn out, so there are chances that undulation or irregularities also develop in the foot section, and this foot section cannot be used as the head section. Okay, and that is the reason nowadays we are no more using the double headed rails in the construction of the railway tracks. The second one what you can see is, we call it, second one is the bull headed rails. So bull headed rail, so here you can see here the dimension of head are more than the foot section. So if we provide your section in such a way that providing the greater depth at the head section compared to the foot section, such rails we call it as the bull headed rails. So in this type of rail, the head is made little thicker and stronger than the lower part by adding more metal into the head section. And to fix the foot section onto the sleepers, we require the chairs and also the keys are required. So you can see here in the picture below, so the foot section is fitted into the sleepers with the help of the chairs and the key. So these are the additional arrangements which we require to fit the rail section with the sleeper section. And bull-headed rails are especially used for making the points and crossings. So now with the rails, we use the chairs and the keys to fix your rail section with the sleepers. But into the what are the merits and demerits of using the bull-headed rails. So bull-headed rails, you can have a better alignment and it will also provide the smooth and stronger track. and the rails provide a longer life to the wooden sleepers, and the greater stability, the stability of the track will be greater, and the sleepers can be and the rail section can be easily removed from the sleepers, and hence the removal of the track section is also easy. But what are all the demerits? The demerits or the disadvantages of using the bull-headed rails. So here, to fit your head rail section into the sleepers, we require the additional fittings. That is nothing but we require the iron chairs, and also the keys are required. Okay, that increases the cost of construction and number of fittings that is required, and the maintenance also the high cost is encountered, and this rail section, the bull-headed rail sections, are of less strength and the stiffness compared to the flat-footed rails. Bull-headed, the next type of rail what we have is the flat-footed rail sections. So now, what is the flat-footed rail? As the name indicates, the foot portion of the rail section is made quietly flatter compared to the head section, as you can see here in the picture. And the flat-footed rails were invented by the researcher called Charles Wagnalls in the year 1836. Hence, we can also call flat-footed rails as Wagnalls rails. Okay, so in this was initially thought that why they are made the foot section flat. It was initially thought that the rail section can be fitted directly onto the sleepers without any fastening. So unlike in the make your flatter, it has been assumed that you can directly fix the rail section to the sleepers without any chains and the keys. But it was found that whenever you directly fix the rail onto the sleeper section, these wooden sleepers what we have used, that used to get worn out. It used to get damaged under the application of the heavy moving load. So the lifespan, the durability of this sleeper section, the lifespan will be reduced here because of the greater chances of worn out. So now, to avoid that, to avoid the additional stresses that is causing on the sleeper section, instead of directly fixing the foot into the wooden sleepers, what we have do, we have used the steel bearing plates. So as you can see here in the picture, these are all the bearings plates. So with the bearing, so we have used the below the foot section, the bearings plates are provided. Through the bearings plate, it is connected through the sleeper. So by providing with the help of the bearing plate, it has been seen that whatever the sleepers, the worn out of the sleepers can be reduced considerably. So now railways, we are most commonly using the flat-footed rails in the construction of the railway tracks. What are the disadvantages and advantages of the using the flat-footed rails? So the flat-footed rails are considered to be have more strength and stiffness compared to the bull-headed rails, and also we don't require any chairs to hold them in the position, and also it requires very less number of fastenings to fix the rail section into the sleeper, and also maintenance cost of the track is less compared to the other. So the demerit is the fittings whatever we use to connect your bearing plates with these sleepers, that get loosened more frequently, and it cannot be easily removed, and hence the renewal of a track is more difficult, and also it is very difficult to manufacture points and crossing using these rails.